In this video, you're going to learn JavaScript by going through a complete project. I'm going to explain to you all of the syntax, what it does, and how it works, but I'm also going to show you my thought process when it comes to building this program and explain to you how to structure your code, some best practices, and a lot of other useful tips that you're not going to get in just a complete beginner tutorial. Now, this video will be a little bit advanced if you've never looked at coding before, but it's definitely something you can still follow along with. And at minimum, it's going to give you a little bit of experience and exposure and show you what it's like to actually complete an entire project. Now, the project we're going to be building here is a slot machine. The way that this is going to work is you're going to deposit some money, so maybe $100, $200, whatever it may be. You're then going to spin the slot machine by betting on a certain number of lines. Now, in a slot machine, you have something called reels. Those are kind of the vertical columns, and those contain different symbols. So we're going to be responsible as the programmer for coming up with what symbols are on those reels, and then kind of spinning those, which is really just randomizing what's on the reels, and then generating some kind of payout if the symbols are matching in a row. I'll explain this more when we get into the video, but this is a really good project for introducing a little bit of complexity and really making you think about the code, but not taking a ton of time. All of this is going to happen in our terminal. We're going to be using Node.js. And I quickly want to clarify here that I have written this project before in Python, but I've never done it before in JavaScript, and I don't have any cheat sheet in front of me. So everything you see here is just me raw coding, thinking about everything that I'm doing, and explaining to you my thought process as best as I can. So with that said, let's dive into the video after a quick word from our sponsor. Before we get started, I need to thank Linode for sponsoring this video. I've been using and working with Linode for nearly 3 years now, and they've consistently been my go-to choice for hosting my applications and servers. In fact, right now I'm using Linode to host the official techwithtim Discord bot, a website, multiple of my domains, and a Kubernetes cluster. Now, Linode was just recently acquired by Akamai, and as a part of this acquisition, they're going to be adding more than a dozen new data centers around the world in the next year. Linode makes it super easy to spin up servers with their one-click app marketplace and have tons of written guides and YouTube videos on their channel to help you get started. Now, if you're having any issues, you can reach out to their 24/7 support team and actually talk with a real human being. Now, Linode's pricing is simple with no hidden fees and full transparency, and you can test out Linode services for free by using the link in the description and claiming an $100 60-day credit for any new accounts. It's been an absolute pleasure to work with Linode over the past few years, and one last thank you to them for sponsoring this video. Alright, so let's dive into the project. Now, the first thing to mention here is I do not at all support gambling. I'm just doing this project because it's a really good one for beginners and to really dive into code and kind of see how to create a complete project. But please do not gamble. I don't gamble myself, and I would never encourage anyone to do that. Regardless, I'm going to quickly explain to you how a slot machine works in case you haven't seen it before. If you already understand, feel free to skip through. But here we're going to do like a simplified version of one just to make it a bit easier for us. So I have the whiteboard in front of me, and I'm just going to draw out in a very messy manner here kind of the idea behind what we're creating. So we're going to imagine here that we have 3 reels. Now, in each of the reels, we're going to have 3 symbols. So maybe we have something like A, B, C, A, B, C, and then maybe we just do A, A, A. Now, excuse my handwriting here. This is with my mouse. Now, what we're going to have here for our slot machine is 3 lines. Now, whenever you play a slot machine, there's a certain number of lines that you can win on. Usually, it's like 80 lines or 60 lines or a stupid amount. In our case, we're just going to do 3, and they're just going to be each row. Okay, so these are the 3 possible lines that you could win on. Now, you only win when you have 3 symbols that match in a row. So in this case, we would have a win, but we would not have a win in either of these 2 rows because we don't have 3 symbols. Now, each symbol will have a varying multiplier. So if I bet, say, $1 on the line and the symbol had a multiplier of 5, then that would mean that we won $5 on that specific line. And we're going to allow the user to bet on a certain number of lines. So if they bet on 1 line, they just bet on this. So they need to have something in this section. If they bet on 2 lines, then they're going to be betting on both of these lines. If they bet on 3 lines, then they bet on all 3 of these, and whatever bet amount they make is going to be multiplied by the number of lines that they bet on. So if they bet $1 on 3 lines, then they bet $3 in total. And if they get symbols in any one of the rows, then they're going to win a certain amount of money based on what the multiplier is for that symbol. All right, so let's dive into it here. First, we just have a little bit of setup. I'm using Node.js, so make sure you download Node.js. I can leave a link for that in the description. And then I'm using Visual Studio Code. Feel free to write your code wherever you want. Now, I've opened up a folder here on my desktop where I'm going to be writing the code. And the first thing I'm going to do is create a new file. So I'm going to say project.js. This is my JavaScript file. Then I need to set up a kind of node directory here because I'm going to install one package, which is going to allow us to get some user input. So I'm going to go here to my terminal. Notice I'm inside of the directory where I'm going to be working, and I'm going to type npm init. Now, this command will only work once you've installed Node.js. If for some reason it's not working and you installed Node.js, then restart VS Code or your terminal or restart your computer, come back in, and then the command hopefully should work for you. Okay, so when I type npm init, it's going to walk me through kind of setting up all of this information. You can fill it in if you want, but you don't have to. I'm just going to click enter through all of this. And now you're going to see that we have a package.json file inside of our directory. Now that we have that, I have the ability to install my package, which I need, which is called prompt and then sync. So npm I prompt-sync. This is what we're going to use to collect user input. So go ahead and run that command. Again, just installing that package. To do this, again, you need Node.js installed, need to be in some directory, and whenever you're in the directory, type npm init, npm I or npm install prompt sync, have some JavaScript file ready to go, and now we can start writing our code. So the first thing I'm going to show you how to do here in JavaScript is collect user input. But before I do that, I quickly want to explain kind of the steps that we need to go through so that we understand what it is that we're going to be building before we start writing any code. This is an important step whenever you're working on a project. You want to kind of break it down into some subcomponents so that you know what it is that you actually have to do, and then you can prioritize those tasks. So let's do some comments here. I keep thinking I'm in Python using the pound symbol. But the first thing that we need to do here when we're setting up a slot machine is we need to know how much money the user has to play with. They're going to deposit or put some money into the slot machine. So the first thing we need to do is deposit some money. Okay. Next thing we need to do is determine how much the user is betting on the slot machine. So we need to collect a bet amount. But before we do that, before we determine the bet, we probably need to know the number of lines that they want to bet on. Do they want to bet on 1 line, 2 line, or all of the lines, which in our case is 3. So I'm going to make another comment here to determine number of lines to bet on. Okay, and then 3 is collect the bet amount. Now, next, we need to actually roll the slot machine or spin the slot machine and then see if the user won. So we're going to say spin the slot machine. And then 5, check if the user won. And then lastly, after we check if they win, we need to then give them the money, right? So give the user their winnings, or in the case where they lost, then we would take their bet, right? And then lastly, we probably need to play again or handle a situation where the user has no money left. Okay, so those are our 7 steps. So what I like to do now that I have these steps and I've kind of thought through the program a little bit is start going through them one by one. It doesn't really matter the order that I complete them in, but kind of creating little pieces of code or functions that implement each step or each thing that we're doing. So let's start with step 1. That kind of makes sense, where we're going to collect a deposit from the user. So to collect the deposit, we're going to create a function. A function is a reusable block of code that you can call that's going to do something for you. So don't worry about it too much if you haven't seen functions before. There's 2 ways to create them in JavaScript. The first way is to write function and then to give the function a name. In our case, the name of the function is going to be, if I could spell this correctly, deposit. Then you're going to do 2 parentheses like this. Any arguments or parameters you have for the function are going to go inside of here. These are things that the function may need to handle that you're going to pass in to the function for it to use while it's doing some code. In our case, we don't have any of those. We just want to get a deposit. And then we're going to open 2 curly braces like this, or open a curly brace and close a curly brace. And then inside of these is going to be the body of our function, which will run when we call this function. So I can call the function by writing the name of the function and then putting 2 parentheses like this. That's going to call the function, trigger it to run. Function's going to do whatever is inside of the curly braces or the body of the function. And then we have the ability to return something from the function. So for example, I could return 1 If I return that, it's going to be returned to where the function was called. So in this case, if I had a variable and I said const x equals deposit, then what that means is that if I return 1, the variable x is going to be equal to 1 because that's what this function call returned. Hopefully that makes sense, but that is your 20-second lesson on how functions work. Now, this is the first way to make a function. The next way to make a function is to do the ES6 style, which is to write a variable. So in this case, I'm going to do const, which stands for constant, meaning this variable does not change. That's going to be the case for our function. I'm going to give it a name. I can't name it deposit because that's what this one is named, but that's fine. I'm going to get rid of this, so let's comment that out. Then I'm going to say this is equal to, and then a set of parentheses. Then I'm going to kind of make an arrow here, so an equal sign and then a greater than sign. Then I'm going to open my curly braces, and this is exactly the same as this function right here. At least that's the way that you can think of it. So in fact, we're going to use this style of function because this is kind of the newer style that most people are using. Works the exact same way, is called the same way, and we can return stuff from this function. Okay, so inside of the deposit function, what we need to ask the user to do is to enter a certain amount. So how we're going to get the user input is using the package that we installed called prompt sync. So the way that we're going to do that is import the package. So we're going to say const, which stands for constant. We're going to say prompt, which is going to be the name of the function we're going to use in a second. This is equal to, and then this is going to be require, and then prompt sync like that. And then make sure you add another set of parentheses here, because what we actually need to do is require this package or this module that we're using that kind of imports it into the program. Then when you call this with these parentheses here, it's going to give you access to a function, and it's a bit confusing, that you can use to get user input. Okay, so now that we have prompt here, we're going to say const, and then we're going to say, let's go with deposit amount is equal to, and then this is going to be prompt. And then inside of parentheses, we're going to put a string, which we do 2 quotation marks for. And we're going to say kind of what we want to ask the user. So I'm going to say enter a deposit amount. Then I'm going to do a colon and a space. I'm just doing a space so that when the user starts typing, they have a little bit of space from the colon. If I didn't do a space, they'd kind of be typing their deposit amount right beside the colon. We don't want that. We want them to have a little bit of space. Okay. And then I'm going to come here, and just for testing purposes, I'm going to call the deposit function. Okay, so I know if you're new to programming, this might be a little bit overwhelming, but all we're doing here is asking the user to enter a deposit amount, storing that in this variable, and then I'm calling the function. So when I call the function, it's going to run the code inside of here, and then it's going to ask the user to input something. They're going to input something, and that's all we have for the program right now. So how do we run this code? Well, we're going to use Node.js. So we're going to go to our terminal, make sure you're in the directory where your project file is or where your code is, and you're going to run node, and then the name of your file, which in this case is project.js. So it says enter a deposit amount, and then notice my cursor is here and I can start typing. So I'm going to type something like 100. Perfect. I've now entered my deposit. Okay. So now that we have the deposit amount, what we need to do is convert this deposit amount to an integer or to a number type in JavaScript, because by default, what's going to be returned here by the prompt is a string. A string is anything that's inside of double or single quotation marks. So we're going to convert this to a number. And the reason we want to do that is because we're going to have to be subtracting from it, adding from it, etc. And we also want to make sure the user entered a valid number. For example, if they enter -100, then they have no balance and, well, they can't play. So the way that we convert this to a number is the following. We're going to say const number deposit amount is equal to, and then this is going to be parse float, and then deposit amount. Now, this parse float function is just going to take a string, and it's going to convert it into its floating point value. So if I had a string that was like 17.2, then that function is going to give us 17.2. Pretty straightforward. Now, if we have a string that is not a number, so a string like hello, and we use this parse float function, it's going to give us something called not a number, so nan like that. And if we get not a number, that means that they didn't enter a valid deposit amount, and we need to ask them to do that again, or we can just quit the program and they would have to try again. Kind of up to you what you want to do there. I'm going to make it so they have to enter the number again. All right, sorry for the cut there. My cat was going a bit crazy, so I had to deal with that. Anyways, what we're going to right now, what we're going to do now is check if this is a valid number. So to do that, we're going to say if, and then we're going to use a function called isNan. Now, isNan checks if something is not a number. So I'm going to say if isNan number deposit amount, or, and you represent or with the 2 pipes here, 2 vertical lines on the keyboard, or number deposit amount is less than or equal to 0, then we're going to say console.log invalid deposit amount, try again. Okay, so we're just simply checking, is it not a number? If it's not a number, or the number is a number, but it's less than or equal to 0, then this is invalid. So we need to tell the user that. Hopefully that makes sense. I don't think I need to explain that much more. Okay, so let's quickly run the code and just make sure this works. So I'm going to say node project.js. I'm going to enter hello, and then notice I get invalid deposit, try again. Now, if I enter a number like 10, all is good. And if I enter a number like -10, then same thing, I get an invalid number. Okay, perfect. Now, next, what we need to do is return the number from this function. And we also need to make the user enter a number again if it's invalid. So the way we do that is the following. We're going to say while true, and then we are going to put all of the code that we just wrote inside of this while statement. Now, this while statement is a loop. This here is the condition for when we should continue looping. So right now I'm saying while true, which just means forever. So it's essentially an infinite loop. We're going to continue to do this. So we're going to ask the user to enter deposit amount, convert it, and then we're going to check this. Now, in the case in which this is a valid number, so in the else case here, we're simply going to return the number deposit amount, which is going to break this while loop. Hopefully that makes a bit of sense, but we're looping forever. Okay, so we're just going to continue to keep looping. We do this, we check if it's an invalid deposit amount. If it is, we're going to console.log this, and then we're just going to ask the user to do this again and continue asking them until they give us a valid amount. Now, otherwise, which is where this else statement comes in. So if this is not the case, then we're going to go in this else statement, and we're going to return the number deposit amount to this deposit function call. So to show you this, I'm going to say const deposit amount is equal to deposit. By the way, I've said this before, but const stands for constant, and it's how you declare a variable. So constant deposit amount is equal to deposit. And then I'm going to say console.log, and then the deposit amount. Okay, so now let's go here and let's run our code and check this out. So node project.js, enter deposit amount. Let's go hello, invalid, enter again, -10, invalid, 10, and then it prints out 10 because that's a valid amount. All right, so we've just finished step 1 here to deposit some money. I realized I spelled this wrong, but that's okay. Now that we've determined what the user has deposited, the next thing that we're going to do is write a function to get the number of lines that they want to bet on, and then we're going to collect the bet. So let's go ahead and do this. We're going to say const get number of lines. And notice that all of these different tasks I'm putting in a function, so that's very clear where that code lives. It's easy to go change it, find it later on. It just makes the code very structured and easy to understand. Okay, number of lines. Let's do this. We're going to ask the user to input number of lines that they want to bet on. So we can really do the same thing that we did here. We can kind of copy all of this code and paste it in. But rather than a deposit amount, this is going to be number of lines. The prompt is going to be enter the number of lines to bet on. And then we can just kind of hard code in here between 1 to 3. Okay, then we're going to say, actually, let's just do lines for this. And then this can be number of lines. And then here we can go and change this to lines. Okay, so already we're doing the exact same thing we did before. We're getting the number of lines they want to bet on between 1 and 3. We're then saying const number of lines is equal to this. And same thing, we want to check if the number of lines is not a number, or the number of lines is less than or equal to 0, or the number of lines is less than or equal to 3, because these are the lines they could possibly bet on. So actually, sorry, if it's, no, not if it's less than or equal to 3. Sorry, if it's greater than 3. My apologies. I'll re-explain that. So we're checking if is what they entered not a number. If it is, okay, that's invalid. Is what they entered less than or equal to 0? If it is, that's invalid. Is what they entered greater than 3? If it is, it's invalid. Now we just need to change the message. We're going to say invalid number of lines, try again. And then here, we're going to return the number of lines. Now I went a bit faster here just because I've already kind of explained how a lot of this code works. Just note here that you can combine as many conditions as you want, and you're just going to go through and check one by one. So we check, is this true? No. Is this true? No. Is this true? No. Okay, we go to the else statement. If any one of these 3 are true, It's invalid. We print that, and then we try again. Okay, so now let's get the number of lines. So I'm going to say const number of lines is equal to get number of lines, like that. And now we can run the code. So first it's going to ask us for our deposit because we did that first. Then it's going to ask us for our number of lines. And notice that I'm kind of writing these functions in the order in which I have them here. Doesn't really matter where I put them, so long as I place them above where I'm using them. So they need to be defined before I call them. All right, let's run our code. So clear node project.js, enter deposit amount. Let's do 100. And then we're going to have to fix this prompt, but enter the number of lines to bet on. Let's do 4, invalid. Let's do 3. All is good. We can bet on 3 lines. Okay, so let's move on here after I fix this prompt. All right, what is next? Collect a bet amount. So we need to figure out how much the user is betting. Now, the amount that the user can bet is going to be based on whatever their current balance is, right? They're going to have some kind of balance, and that's going to be based on whatever they deposited. So rather than having the const deposit amount here, let's actually change this variable. And let's say that this is let balance equal deposit. Now, that's because the starting balance is going to be equal to whatever they start by depositing. And then we're going to adjust the balance based on what they're betting and what they're winning. Now, notice that's why I changed the type of this variable here to be let. Rather than having a constant, I'm changing it to let. Now, what let lets me do is adjust the value of this variable. So later on, I can say add to the variable, subtract it. I can change what it's storing. Whereas if I have a constant, I can't do that. I can't change the value of a constant because it's constant. But a variable using a let, you can change the value of it. So that's why I needed to change the variable type here. Okay, so we have the balance, we have the number of lines, and now we're going to write a function that allows us to get the total bet. So we're going to say const get bet, and the bet is going to be based on the balance that the user has, because they can't have a bet that is more than their current balance. So I'm going to take balance as what's known as a parameter. What that means is I need to pass a balance to this function when I call it. And now inside of the function, we can use this balance variable to determine what the maximum bet is. So same thing here. I'm going to copy this code. Really, we could probably write a function that, reworks this, but for our case, it's fine to kind of copy it and just adjust it. So I'm going to have, again, while true. Now this time, I'm going to have const bet is equal to enter the total bet, like that. We're going to have number bet just because I'm converting it. Now here, we're going to put bet. And then again, we just need to change a few of these things. So we're going to say number bet, and then we're going to say number bet is greater than the balance this time, because now the maximum they have is the balance, not a fixed number like 3. And then here we're going to say invalid bet, try again, and then we're going to return the number bet. So I know this is fairly repetitive. That's kind of why I'm going through it quickly, but you get the idea. These are 3 kind of input functions: get the deposit, get the number of lines, get the bet, make sure all of those are valid. Once we have all of that, we can kind of do the more interesting stuff, which is spinning the slot machine and calculating how much the user won. So now let's call this bet function. So we're going to say const, and then we're going to say bet is equal to, and then this is going to be get the bet, and the bet is going to be based on the balance. Perfect. So let's test this out and make sure it's working. Clear node project. Okay, let's enter deposit like 100. Let's do 3 lines, enter the total bet, and let's bet 2. Okay, great. Now, while I was doing this, I just realized that the bet that you're going to have is going to be multiplied by the number of lines. So this is actually not quite correct, because right now we're only allowing you to bet based on your balance, but not based on the number of lines. Really, the maximum bet you can make is whatever your balance is divided by the number of lines that you're going to bet on, because that's how many places you're going to place the bet. If you bet 2, really your total bet's going to be 6 because you're placing that on 3 lines. So I'm going to change this here to say enter the bet per line. Okay. And then we're going to now take in the number of lines. And here, we're going to pass the number of lines. Now, we're going to make sure that the number is not greater than the balance multiplied by the lines. Sorry, not multiplied, divided by the lines. And just to make this clear, we're going to put these in parentheses. I guess actually we don't need the parentheses. It just removed it for me, so that's fine. Hopefully you're getting what I'm saying there. Since the bet is distributed between multiple lines, based on the number of lines you bet on, that's going to affect what the maximum bet can be. Okay, now that we have this, let's just try this one more time. Okay, so here, enter deposit. Let's enter 50. Number of lines is 3. Now let's try to bet, say, 40. Invalid bet, try again, because that's going to be over based on the number of lines that we have. Now if we try 20, same thing, it's invalid. It's going to be over based on the number of lines. If we do 15, that's fine. We can bet 15 per line. Okay, perfect. So we've done the first 3 things here, which is deposit some money, determine the number of lines, collect a bet amount. Now we need to spin the slot machine. This is where it gets a little bit more challenging, but that's okay. Let's dive into it. All right, so as we dive into building the slot machine here, I'm going to give myself a bit of room at the top of the program because I'm going to start defining some variables that are going to depict how big the slot machine is and how many symbols we can potentially have in each row. So first, let's just define the number of rows and columns we want to have. So really the number of reels and the number of symbols that will appear in each reel. Then we need to know what symbols we have in total. So do we have 5 different symbols, 7 different symbols, etc.? And what is the value of each symbol, as well as the quantity of each of them in the reel? That's what's going to define kind of the payout structure, the probability, etc. I'm not going to make this balanced. I don't really know what I'm picking here. It's a little bit random, but I like to declare all of these as what I refer to as global variables. And I do all of my global variables at the very top of the program, so it's very easy to see them and to change them. So all I need to do if I want to adjust, say, the size of the slot machine is go to the very top of the program, change a clearly named variable to, say, 4 or 5, some larger number, and now all of a sudden I have a bigger slot machine and my entire program will work. You'll see what I mean, but let's define these variables. So first of all, you'll notice I'm going to do this beneath where I have my prompt. So the typical tradition is you want to have all of your imports and kind of libraries at the top of your program, then your global variables, then your classes and functions, and then the main line or the other aspects of your program, which is kind of what I'm following right now. So I'm going to say const because all of these are going to be constants. And the first variable I'm going to have is rows. Now I don't need to make this a constant, but it's typically a practice of any of your global variables that are constants are in all capitals. I know it seems a little bit weird, but that's what we're doing here. So I'm going to say const rows. We're going to have 3 rows, and const calls is going to be equal to 3. Okay. Next thing we need to define is the symbols. So first of all, we need to know what symbols we're going to have and how many of them we can have in each reel, so each column. And then we need to know what the value of each symbol is, which is just going to be some multiplier based on your bet. So we're going to create a map. And the way we can do this is the following. Actually, we're going to create an object. It's kind of similar, but you'll see. We're going to say const symbols is equal to, and actually I'm going to say symbols underscore count. You'll notice that I'm going with snake case here, which uses an underscore for kind of a space separator rather than camel case. And that's because I'm doing this in all capitals, and that's the convention. Anyways, for my symbols, I'm going to have A's, which will be my most valuable symbol. And we'll say there's only 2 A's in each reel. Okay. I'm going to have B's. We'll say there's 4 of those. We're going to have C's. We can say there's 6 of those. And then D's, we can say that there is 8 of them. Again, I don't know if this is going to be balanced or not, but these are the symbols that you can possibly have in each reel or each column. And we're going to randomly select from these number of symbols, okay? Now, this object allows me to have keys mapped with different values. So I have a key A here mapped with the value 2. So that means if I were to do something like symbols count at A, this would give me the value, which is 2. Hopefully that makes a bit of sense, but that's like a very quick introduction to objects in JavaScript, allow you to have keys or properties or attributes associated with values, okay? All right, next, we're gonna have our symbol values, okay? Now, the values are going to be similar here, but we're gonna say A is 5, B is 4, C is 3, and D is 2. Now this means if I get a line of A's, I'm going to multiply the bet by 5. That's going to be the payout because of that line. If I get a line of B's, I'm going to multiply the bet by 4, etc. So this is the multiplier or the value of each symbol relative to what we're going to multiply it by. Okay, so now that we have our constants, what we need to do is create a function that kind of spins a slot machine. Now, really spinning the slot machine is just going to be randomly selecting, based on these counts, what symbols we have in each reel. Then we need to determine if the user won anything. Okay, so let's do this. We're going to say const, and we're going to say spin. Okay. Now for the spin, we don't need to take in any parameters. We can just generate the different reels. So to generate the reels, the first thing that we need to do is figure out how many symbols we have. Now we know that based on this, but what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put all of the possible symbols that we could use inside of a list or inside of an array, and then I'm going to randomly select them out of the array and remove them from the array every single time that we use them while we're generating each reel. So we're going to generate individual columns, right? That's what we need to do. Yeah, let's generate the columns and then you'll see what I mean. All right, so as I was saying, let's generate an array that contains all of the possible symbols that we could have. So I'm going to say const, and then this is going to be symbols is equal to, and then an empty array. Now, notice that even though we're going to be adding elements into this array, I still made this variable type a constant. That's because I'm not going to change the value of the array. I'm not going to actually change what array I'm using. I'm instead just going to be adding elements inside of it. I know that seems a little bit misleading or a little bit confusing. This is something to note in JavaScript. An array is what's known as a reference data type, which means I can manipulate what's inside of the array without changing the reference to the array itself. So I don't need to assign a new value to symbols. I can just add stuff inside of this array, and that's not going to violate the principle of this being a constant variable. It's a little bit strange. A lot of people get confused by that. Hopefully that gives you a bit of an explanation. So what I need to do now is I need to loop through all of the different entries that I have inside of my symbols object, or my symbols count here, okay? Now, notice that I got rid of my quotation marks. You don't actually need quotation marks for your keys or for your properties or attributes in JavaScript. You do in Python, hence why I added them, because I thought we're in Python, but no, we're in JavaScript. Okay, so I'm going to make a for loop here. I'm going to say for, and then this is going to be symbol of, and then I'm going to say this is object dot entries of, and then our symbol underscore count. Okay. So the way that you loop through all of the different entries inside of an object, and our entries are going to be this, right? So A2, B4, C6, D8 is you use this, right? You use symbol of object dot entries, and actually we're going to say symbol and count of object dot entries, and we need to put these inside of an array, and we need to put our const here. Okay, sorry, I'm getting a little confused just because I usually work in Python and it's a bit different, but we're going to say constant, and then inside of an array, we're going to say symbol and count of object dot entries. That's going to loop through all of the different entries in our symbol count, and it's going to give us, first of all, what the key is, or what the symbol is, and then what the value is associated with each of those. So to quickly illustrate that, I'm just going to console.log the symbol and the count, and I'm just going to call this spin function here, just so you can see how the looping works before we go any further. So let's quickly run this, and notice I get A2, B4, C6, and D8, okay? So I'm looping through all of them, and now I'm just going to get out of this. I guess I need to just enter some values here. Okay, perfect. So now we're out of that. All right, so that's how the looping works. Now that we have the symbol and the count, we're going to add that many symbols into our symbols array. So we're going to do another for loop, and we're going to say for, I'm going to say let I equal 0, I is less than, and this is going to be count. Then I'm going to say I plus plus, and then I'm going to say symbols dot push, and I'm going to push the symbol into the array. Now this is just going to add however many symbols we have. So in this case, if we had 2 A's, it's going to add 2 A's into this symbols array. The way that you add them in is by pushing them into the array. So typically in other languages, you'll see append. In JavaScript, it's push. That's how you insert a new element inside of an array. And an array is just a collection of multiple elements. So I could have A, B, 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 like that inside of the array. Okay, hopefully that is clear. So for every single symbol and for the count of those symbols, we're going to have another for loop, and we're going to insert that many symbols into the array. So now again, just quickly before we go any further, let's print out what the symbols array looks like after we run this code. So let's call the spin function. Let's go here, and run it, and notice that this is our array, okay? So we have 2 A's, 4 B's, 6 C's, and 8 D's. The point of doing that is now that we are going to be able to, one sec, let me get out of this here, randomly select elements from the symbols array when we are inserting them in our reals. Okay, so let's do this. We're going to say const reals is equal to, and then we're going to create 3 nested arrays. Now, this is simply an array inside of an array. You can do that. It's valid. Just like we had elements inside of here, we can have arrays inside of arrays, and each one of these arrays is going to represent a column inside of our slot machine, okay? So if we had A, really you'd visualize that like A, okay? So each one of these kind of nested arrays is a column, and we're going to generate what's inside of them using this symbols array. Okay, how do we do that? Well, we need to go through each one of our reals. So we're going to say for, and then this is going to be let I, and actually, yeah, we'll say let I equal 0, I is less than, and this will be the number of columns that we have, and then we're going to say I plus plus. So this first for loop here is going to be for each one of our reals. So for every single reel that we have, or every single column that we have, we need to generate what's inside of it. Then for every single column, we need to pick the 3 elements, or the X elements, whatever the number of rows is that we have that are inside. So then we're going to say for, and we're going to say let J equal 0, J is less than rows, and then J plus plus, like this. So we have a nested for loop. The reason we need that is because we have nested arrays. So for every single array, generate the number of rows, the number of elements that need to go inside of that array or inside of each reel. Hopefully that's making a bit of sense, but that's kind of what we're doing here. Now, in case you're confused by this syntax, the way this works is we define some counter variable that we can use while we're running through this for loop to keep track of how many more iterations or loops we need to perform. We then set how many loops we want to do. So we say while I is less than the number of columns. That's what this means. It means while I is less than the number of columns, keep looping. As soon as it's equal to or greater than, we're going to stop. Then we have what's referred to as our increment. We're saying every time we do this loop one time, increment the variable I by 1, allowing us to keep looping, keep track of what loop we're on, and then eventually exit the for loop. So obviously same thing is happening here for J. I'm just using a different variable because we can't have the same variable for both of our loops. All right, now inside of here, we need to randomly select elements from our symbols. But remember that the elements that we can have, or the symbols we can have in each reel, are for each reel. So what I actually need to do here is create another variable. I'm going to say const reel, we'll say reel symbols is equal to, and then this is going to be an array. Now, actually what this is going to be is an array, and we're going to say dot, 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 and then symbols. Now, what this is going to do is just copy the symbols that we have available to choose for each reel into another array. The reason we're doing that is because for every single one of our reels, these are all the available symbols that we have. So what I'm going to do is randomly select a symbol, and then I'm going to add that into the reel, and I'm going to remove it from the available symbols to continue to select. So if I already used 2 A's in one reel, I can't have any more A's. I need to remove them so I don't pick them again. But when we move on to the next reel, we have to have those A's available for the next reel. So I can't be removing elements from this symbols list. I need to remove them from one that's specific to each reel. So inside of our for loop, remember, this is for every one of the reels that we have, we generate the available symbols. Then we're going to remove from them as we add the symbols into each reel. I know this is a little bit confusing, and I said reel probably 100 times there. Hopefully it's a little bit clear why we're doing that, but it's because each reel has their own symbols that they can pick from. So we need to have a copy of the available symbols that we're manipulating inside of the for loop. Okay, let's continue here. I'm going to say that our symbol, so I'm going to say const selected symbol is equal to, and then I need to randomly select an element from this array. Now, the way I randomly select an element from an array is I randomly choose an index or a position in the array. So quick recap here. If we have some things in our array, say we have A, B, C, each one of these things has an index in the array. Now, the first index is 0, the next is 1, and the last is 2. So you always start at 0, you count up by 1. Fairly straightforward. So what I want to do is randomly select one of these indices or indexes, and then choose the element there, remove it from the existing array, and insert it into my reel. That's what we need to do. So we need to randomly pick one of the indices. Now, how do we randomly select an index? Well, we need to use our random function. So we are going to say, actually, this is going to be reel symbols at the index. Now, the way that you access elements at a specific index is you write square brackets, and then you put 0, 1, 2, 3, whatever the index is. So if we're accessing the fourth element, we put index 3. Now, the question is, what is the random index? So we can go here and say const random index is equal to, and then in all capitals, we're going to type math dot random, and we're going to multiply this by whatever the length of our reel symbols is. So we're going to say reel symbols dot length, and then we're going to put around this math dot floor. Okay. Then here, this is going to be random index like that. All right, what are we doing? Well, we are generating a random index. Now, what I've done is I've taken math.random, and math.random is going to generate a random number between 0 and 1. So it's a floating point value between 0 and 1. Then we take that number and we multiply it by whatever the length of our symbols is. That means that the maximum possible number that this expression is going to generate for us is going to be however many symbols we have. It's the maximum possible number. Then we're going to say math.floor. Now, the reason we're doing math.floor is we're going to round this number down to the nearest or to the lowest whole number. So if we had like 1.9, we're going to round it to 9. The reason we do that is because really the possible numbers that we can pick from, the possible indices we can pick from, is the length of our array minus 1. So we don't want to round up because that would give us an index that's possibly out of the array. We need to round down so we get one that is less than the reel symbols.length. So again, just to kind of clarify what's happening here, this is going to generate a random number between 0 and then whatever the length of our reels is minus 1. And then we can use that to select the element or the symbol from our reel symbols array. I know it's a bit complicated here, but that's why I wanted to do this project, to give you a bit of a challenge. So now that we have our selected symbol and we know the random index, we're going to first say reels, and then this is going to be at index I. Now, index I is going to represent the reel that we're currently working on. So if we're working on the first reel, I is 0. So it's index 0. If it's the first reel, or sorry, the second reel, then I is 1. So it's index 1. So I'm going to say reels I dot push. So I'm pushing into the interior array the selected symbol. Okay, we're almost done. The last thing we need to do is remove this symbol so we can't select it again while we generate this reel. So we say reels symbols dot splice, and we're going to splice at whatever the random index is that we selected, because that's the position that this element existed at, or this symbol existed at, and then we're going to put 1. Now 1 just means remove one element, so that's all we need for that, and random index is the position at which we're removing that element. So we're selecting the symbol at this index, we're adding it into this array here, and then we're removing it so we don't select it again when we continue generating this reel. And that's all we need for generating our reels. Now we can return the reels like that. Now I just want to quickly print out what we're going to get for our reel. So I'm going to say const reels is equal to spin, just to make sure this is working before I go on to explain too much more stuff. I will walk you through this again, but let's just quickly run this. So I'm going to say node project.js, and then notice this is what we get for our reels. So C, D, 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 A, D, 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 D. Now notice we get a lot of Ds because we have 8 of them available in our symbols cap. If I run it again, so let's just get out of this, okay, and run it one more time, notice that we get different values here in our reel. So it is indeed random. Okay, so that means now that we have completed these 4. Deposit some money, determine the number of lines, collect a bet amount, spin the slot machine. Now we need to check if they won, which is fairly simple. We need to give the user their winnings, and we need to play again. Let me quickly recap what we did here, then we'll get into those steps. So we started by generating an array of all of the available symbols that we can pick from when we are going to choose what's inside of each reel, randomly choose. So this contains all of the available symbols. Then we created an array here, kind of temporary array that we're going to add to, that has all of the different reels. So we have one reel, second reel, third reel. We loop through all of the reels that we have, which is represented by the number of columns. Now, really, I just realized it's a little bit flawed what we're doing here, because if the number of columns is different than 3, we're going to get a bit of an error here. So I'm just going to quickly fix this, even though I don't love changing this all right now, by saying reals.push, and then I'm going to push an array here. And now we can remove this. The reason that's going to work is because for every single reel or column we have, we add one inside of here, okay? And then once we add it, we can now push elements inside of that reel. Hopefully that fix makes a bit of sense. Anyways, once we do that, we then copy all of the available symbols that we have. So we now have kind of a unique array to pick from for this specific reel. Then we loop through all of the rows. All of the rows is the number of symbols we're going to have in each reel. And we randomly generate one of the available symbols. So we pick one of the symbols that are available and we insert that into our reel. So we say our random index is this. We get our selected symbol. So that's going to be whatever the symbol is at that index. We push that into the current reel that we're working on, which is represented by I, and then we remove that from the available symbols so we don't select that again. Perfect. Okay, then we return reels, and we are all good. Let's continue now and work on generating or checking if the user won anything. All right, so let's go ahead and continue. Now, first thing to mention here is that with our reels, and by the way, I'm just going to take these and move them down because that's kind of the logical order we need here. Our reels look like this when we get them. So we have arrays, right? And each one of our arrays, let's just do A, B, C, maybe D, 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 A, A. These are our kind of vertical columns, right? These are, our columns. Now, what we want to be doing when we're checking if a user is winning is we want to check in the rows. Now, right now, based on the way that we have our data, it's going to be a little bit difficult to check each row and see if every element in the row is the same. So what we're going to do is we're going to transpose this array into all of the rows. So again, I know this is a little bit weird, but these right now are our columns. What we want to have is an array that has all of our rows. Once we have the rows, we can then check who's winning or what row is winning, and we can then present that to the user. So when we're looking at this, right, we have these as our columns, but we want to instead have it like this, where we have rows. So our rows would look like this: A, D, A, and notice I'm taking A, D, A, because that's what's going to be in row 1. These are all in unique columns. Then we're going to have B, D, A, and then we're going to have C, D, A. Again, if we look at row 2 here, that's B, D, A. We look at row 3, C, D, A. So we need to turn our data into this format, and then once we have that, we can continue. Now, this is called transposing a matrix or transposing a 2D array, whatever you want to refer to it as. So we're going to write some code that does that. We're going to get the transposed kind of matrix, reels, whatever you want to call it. Then we can check who's winning or what rows are winning, how much money they won, etc. And we can continue from there. So let's write a function here. Let's actually just call it const. And we're going to say transpose. Again, this is going to give us the rows. So we're going to take in our reels and we're going to transpose them. So how do we transpose? Well, first we need a new array. So we're going to say const. We'll just call this rows like that. And for our rows, that's fine for now. So what we're going to do here is we're going to create a for loop that goes through the number of rows that we have. For each row, so row 0, row 1, row 2, or row 1, 2, 3, whatever you want to refer to them as, we're going to collect all of the elements from our columns that are in that row and then push that into the rows array. So we're going to say for let I equal 0, I is less than, and then this is going to be the number of rows, and then I plus plus. Okay. Then what we're going to do is say rows dot push, and we're going to push a new row because for every single row, we need to have an array that represents that. So we push those inside of here. Then we're going to say for let j equal 0, j is less than, and then this is going to be the number of calls, and then j plus plus like this. So for every single row, loop through every single column. So now for every column that we have, we're going to grab the element that's in the first row in that column and push it into our rows array. So we're going to say that rows at row I, because that's the current row that we're building, dot push, and then we're going to push the reels at, and then this is going to be column J at row I. I know, seems a little bit weird, but we're accessing each of the individual columns. So we're going through the 3 columns that we have, or however many columns that we have. So we're accessing that column. Then for each one of those columns, we're getting the element in the row that we're currently building, which is represented by I. Okay? Then we can simply return our rows, and that's how you transpose it. Now I'm going to print this out, and you'll see what the transposition looks like, and then it'll make this a bit more clear. Okay, so we have our reals. Now I'm going to say const, let's call it rows, is equal to transpose, okay? And then we're going to transpose the reals. Now we're going to just console.log the reals, and then we're going to console.log the rows, and you'll see the difference and how that transposition occurs. So let's run this. Say node project.js. Okay, let's run through this. And here we go. So we can see that we have all of our individual columns. So CID, CDC, DBD. Now let's look at our first row. Remember, this is kind of flipped. So for our first row, we have C, C, and then D. That's what we want. For our second row, we have A, D, and then B. Okay. And then for our third row, we have D, C, B. So now that we have those, what we can do is simply print those out, and we can kind of represent to the user what it is that they actually spun. Okay. So we're going to make another function here that's going to print our rows. So we're going to say const print, we could say print slot machine, or print rows is fine. And we're going to take in our rows, and we're just going to print out all of these elements in some kind of styled way. Okay, so we're going to loop through every single one of our rows, and then print. So we're going to say for, and we're going to say let I. Actually, do we need to go I? I think we can say for const row of rows. Okay, then we want to loop through every single row and kind of build a string that represents that row, and then print that out. So I'm going to say let row string equal. This is going to be an empty string. And essentially what I want is this, like A, pipe B, pipe C. And we're going to build that using a for loop going through each of the elements in our row. Now, by the way, this is iterating by item, which means that I'm going to get an array here. So I'm looping through every array, every nested array, or every row inside of my rows array. Remember, it's a 2-dimensional array. So this will be an array that I can then loop through and get each of the elements. Okay, so we have our row string here. And I'm going to say for. And this time I need to do a different style for loop here. I'm going to say for const, and then we're going to go with I symbol of row dot entries. I think I can access dot entries on an array. We're going to see if that works. Then we're going to do the following. We're going to say row string plus equals, and then this is going to be the symbol. So when you do plus equals, you're kind of concatenating a string. So you're adding elements into the string. So if I go plus equals A to my empty string, I get A. If I go A plus A, then I get AA. So that's what we're building here, okay? That's what we're doing with the concatenation. Then we need to determine if we're going to add our pipe operator or not. Now we're only going to add the pipe operator if it's not the last symbol that we have. Because again, we have A, B, C, we don't want to have a pipe here, so we need to make sure we don't add that. So we're going to say if I does not equal rows.length minus 1, because this is the maximum possible value I can be equal to, then what we'll do is we'll say row string, and then this is going to be plus equals, sorry, and then we're going to add a space and a pipe and a space. I think that is correct. And then in terms of this here, sorry, I'm just going to change this to say row.entries. And then this is going to say row.length. I don't want to use rows. We're already doing that here. We want to loop through our individual row. Now that we have the row string, we're going to say console.log, the row string. And now we're going to print each of our individual rows, and they'll be nicely laid out, and we'll kind of see each of the elements that's in each row and column. Hopefully that's making a bit of sense. Again, we're going through every single row in our rows. That's going to give us an array representing the elements in that row. We're then going to loop through both the index and the element that exists in this row. So if we have rows like A, B, C, then what we're going to be getting here is 0, so 0, A. 1B, 2C, because it gives us the index as well as the element. We're then checking, okay, is the index the last index or the last element? If it is, then we are going to not put the pipe. If it isn't, then we're going to put the pipe and the separator in this string. So we build this string up, and then we can print it out here, and that's fine for printing the rows. So let's go print rows, rows like that. Let's go here and clear and rerun. Okay, let's do this here. And there we go. We get our nicely printed slot machine. Now, in this case, we didn't win at all. But if we did win, well, that's what we're going to handle next. Seeing if user won, giving them their bet amount, or whatever they won, etc. Okay, so let's just quickly recap here. We've done depositing some money, determining the number of lines, collecting a bet amount, spinning the slot machine. We then transpose the slot machine. Now that we have it transposed, it's going to be really easy to check if the user won. We're going to do that, and then we need to determine their winnings to get back to them, right? Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to say const get winnings. All right, now to do this, we're going to take the rows, we're going to take the bet amount, and we're going to take the lines that the user bet on. That's what we need to know to be able to determine what they won. If they only bet on one line, we're only checking the first row. If they bet on 2, checking both those rows. If they bet on 3, then we're checking all of the rows. Okay, so let's go through this. So we're going to begin by saying let winnings equal 0, and then we'll add to that whenever they win something. All right, so to do this, we're going to loop through all of the lines, which is really the row indices that we want to be checking. So we're going to say for, and we can say let row equal 0, row is less than lines, row plus plus. Now, the reason this for loop is going to work for us is if lines is 1, that means we're only ever going to look at row at index 0. If lines is 2, we're going to look at index 0 and index 1, which would be the first 2 rows. If it's 3, we look at 0, 1, and 2, and that means that we're going to look at all of the rows that are inside of our, well, rows. Okay, so now we're going to say const symbols is equal to, and then this is going to be rows at whatever the row index is. All right, so now that we have all of the symbols, we just need to check if all of them are the same. So I'm going to create a variable here, and I'm going to say let all same equal true. Now, what we're going to do is if we find that one of the symbols is not the same, we're going to make this variable false. We're then going to use that later to determine if the user won in this specific row. Okay, so we're going to go for, and then we're going to say const symbol of symbols. Again, iterating by item here, looking at each of the individual symbols. All we're going to do here is we're going to say if the symbol does not equal symbols at index 0, then we're going to say all same equals false, and we're going to break out of the for loop. Now, there's a bunch of different ways to go about doing this. What I'm doing is not necessarily the most efficient because we're going to be repeating a certain check, but it's fine for the purposes of this tutorial. So the reason I'm doing this is I'm saying, okay, I'm going to loop through every single one of the symbols that I have. Now, if every single symbol that I have is the same as the first symbol, all of them are going to be the same. So I'm just using the first symbol as what it is that I'm going to compare against. And again, if all of them are the same as the first symbol, then all of them must be the same. So in the situation where one of them is not the same, so symbol does not equal symbols at index 0, then I'm going to say all same equals false. And then I'm going to break out of this for loop because there's no reason to continue looking if one of the symbols is not the same. Now, this break keyword, as I just described, is simply going to exit the for loop. So it doesn't matter what iteration you're at. If you see this break keyword, boom, you're done iterating. So we're setting all same equal to false, and that means we did not win in this specific line or in this specific row. So now we come down here after we've iterated through, and if all the same is false, we didn't win. If all same is true, we did win. Because if it's true, that means we got through here. This was never the case, and that means that all of the symbols are the same. So we're going to say if all same, then winnings, and this is going to be plus equal the bet multiplied by, and then this is going to be the, not rows, sorry, the symbol values at symbols at index 0. I know, a little complex here, but remember symbol values is what we have all the way up here. We have 5, 4, 3, 2, right? This is the multiplier. So we need to find that multiplier and multiply that by our bet. So if we had a row of A's, then we're going to take whatever our bet is and we're going to multiply it by 5. Again, we're only doing that if all of the symbols were the same. We're determining what the symbol is that we want to look for the multiplier for by just grabbing the first symbol in the row. At this point, we know that all of them are the same, so we could really grab any index from the row, but we know we're always going to have at least one symbol, so this is fine to do. Okay, so that's actually all we need for this. Now we're going to return our winnings. All right. Hopefully that is all clear. I think that that is correct. If I made any mistake, of course, I will fix that. And also, let me just get rid of this. Actually, no, we want the const.log. Sorry, I don't know why I was going to remove that. All right. So now, after we print our rows, we want to determine what the winnings is. We're going to say const winnings is equal to get, and did I call this winnings? Yes. And then what do I need to pass here? My rows, my bet, and my lines. So we're going to say rows, we're going to say bet, and then we're going to say lines. Now, I just want to confirm here what the bet is actually going to be, because if the bet is the total bet, that's not what we want. We want the bet per line. So let's look at get bet. Okay, so get bet, return number bet. Yes, okay, so it looks like the bet that we're returning here is the bet that we have per line, which is what we want because that's what we're multiplying by if we have an entire line. Okay, so now we have our winnings. Now I'm just going to print U1, and then we can say comma and a $sign, and then we can say plus, and sorry, this is not print, this is console.log. I'm writing in Python right now. And then we can say plus winnings, and I don't know if we have to do .toString or not, but I'm going to put this .toString. Okay, so we have const winnings equals get winnings, rows, bets, lines. It tells us how much money we won. So we're going to get that, and then we're going to print out U1, and then whatever that dollar amount is. Then we're going to have to kind of continue this game a little bit, but for now, this should give us one round or one spin of the slot machine. So let's try this. Okay, enter deposit amount. Let's deposit 100. Let's bet on all 3 lines. Let's enter the bet per line of maybe $10. And we got an error here. It says lines is not defined. Okay, so that's at line 144. Lines here. That's because we need number of lines. Okay, so that was the issue. Let's quickly fix that. Let's come back here and run 100, 3, and then 10. And we won $0. Okay, let's try it again. 100, 3, 10. You won $0. Okay, hopefully we're going to win something. So let's see here. 3, 10. You won $20. Okay, perfect. And the reason we won 20 is because we bet $10 on 3 lines. And we won with this line here, giving us $20 because we had a 2 times multiplier with the D's. Now, if we won on multiple lines, of course, we'd get the winnings for all of that. All right, so that is really the core logic for our game. Now, what was the last thing we need to do here? We need to give the user their winnings, and we need to play the game again. So let's work on that. And once we do that, then we're going to be finished this game. All right, so how are we going to turn this into a fully functioning game? We have the core logic here, but after we determine what the user wins, we need to give them those winnings. We also need to subtract whatever their bet is from their balance, right? So let's make a function. Let's say define, or not define. Again, I keep writing in Python. Sorry, guys. We're going to call this game. Now, this will just be one round. Will this be one round of the game? No, it's okay. This can be the entire game. So we're going to go game, and then we're going to call the game function down here just to kind of clarify where everything is for our code. Okay, so we start by determining the balance. That's fine. Then we get the number of lines, the bet, the reals, the rows, etc. Now, all of this stuff here, we're going to do no matter what, right? We're just going to keep playing if the user wants to continue playing. So I'm going to say while true here, and then I'm going to do all of this. Okay. Now we're going to add some more code, obviously, but we're going to keep doing this. If they run out of money, then we are going to break, or if they say they don't want to play anymore, then we're going to break the while loop and kind of get out of it. So we start, get the number of lines. We get the bet, we get the reals, we get the rows, we print this out, we get the winnings. Now let's start handling some logic here. So after we collect what the user's bet is, we are going to take the balance and we're going to subtract. So minus equals, this means take the balance and subtract from it whatever the bet is multiplied by the number of lines. Because this bet is per line, so whatever number of lines they bet on, that's what we're removing. Okay, so we remove that from the balance, subtract it. Then we generate our reels, we print the rows, we tell the user what they won, and then we have to add this to their winnings. So we're going to say balance plus equals winnings. Perfect. Now at the top here, we should probably always tell them what their balance is so they know what it is before they spin again. So we're going to say print, you have a balance of, and then we're going to do a dollar sign, and then we're going to do a plus, and then we're going to put the balance so that it looks like it's money. Okay, so we print what their balance is. Sorry, this needs to be console.log. I'm going to keep making that mistake. We have the winnings. And now all we need to do down here is we need to check if they have $0 left. If they do, then we are going to quit the game, or we're going to ask them, do you want to walk away? Do you want to stop gambling, etc.? If they say yes, then we're going to break. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to say if the balance is, we can say less than or equal to 0, but really it's never going to be able to be at that, but that's fine. We'll just say if it's less than or equal to 0, then we're going to break. But first we'll go console.log. You ran out of money, exclamation point. Okay. And then we're going to say, after this, we're going to ask the user if they want to play again. So we're going to say const play again is equal to prompt. Do you want to play again? Question mark. And then we're going to accept as an answer either Y or N. And if they type anything other than Y, then we are going to quit. So I'm going to say if play again does not equal Y, then we can simply break. Notice that when you're just doing a one-line kind of if statement, or you have a one-line body, you don't actually have to add the curly braces here. You can just write it directly after the if statement. So if they didn't type yes to wanting to play again, then we're just going to break and leave the game. Otherwise, we just keep playing. So if they run out of money, we quit. Or if they tell us they want to leave, then we break. Okay, hopefully that's clear. Let's test our game, make sure everything's working, and then that's going to pretty much wrap up this project. So let's go here, node project.js. Let's deposit 100. We have a balance of $100. Enter the number of lines to bet on. Let's bet on 2 lines. Enter the bet per line. Let's do $5. You won $0. Okay, do you want to play again? Yes. You have a balance of $90. Enter the number of lines to bet on. Let's bet on 3 lines. Bet per line of $10. You won $0. Do you want to play again? All right, this isn't going too well for us. You have a balance of $60. Enter the number of lines to bet on. 3. Bet per line. 2. We won $6. So I guess we had a 3 times multiplier there with our C's. Play again. And you get the idea. We can continue playing this. Obviously, we could clean up the terminal a little bit, make it a bit cleaner and kind of easier to understand. Let me just go through this here so I can quit and exit. But I think that is going to do it for now. All right, so let's quickly run through everything one last time. I'll just like kind of high level overview the code and everything that we did. By the way, all of this code will be available from GitHub. Then we're going to wrap up the video. So first of all, we have prompts. So we're requiring this module so we can get some user input. We define some global variables here. We do them in all capitals just so that it's clear they are constants and they're at the top of our program. Okay, we have our function deposit, talked about that. Continue ask the user for a valid deposit. Get number of lines, get the number of lines or rows in this case that the user wants to bet on. Get the bet, same thing. We're going to get a valid bet amount per line based on the balance that they have and the number of lines they are betting on. Next, we are going to spin the slot machine. To do this, we need to generate all of the possible symbols in each reel. We then need to randomly select them, put them on a reel, and that's what we've done. Okay, then we have transpose. This is kind of a helper function that's going to convert all of our columns into all of our rows so we can better use this information. It's easier for us to check if the user won anything, and it's easy for us to kind of print out this information. Next, we have print rows. Again, this is just going to print out all of our rows in kind of nice, fancy formatting. Then we have get winnings, determining all of the winnings a user won from the specific rows or reels that they had in the slot machine. Lastly, we have our game function where we continually play the game until the user runs out of money or until they tell us they don't want to play anymore. All right, so I hope With that said, you guys have learned a lot in this video. I know this is not perfect. Again, I was doing this just from scratch. I didn't have any cheat sheet. This was just me thinking about it on the fly. I wanted to show you how I think about problems, how I solve problems, how I structure the program, and hopefully you guys found some value in that. If you like these styles of videos, let me know in the comments down below. I always appreciate all of your support and your feedback. Really, you guys are the ones who give me all the kind of ideas for videos to make. And someone on a previous video said, hey, you should make a video like this for JavaScript. So that's what I did. Regardless, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next one.